I actually had a franchise owner who phoned me after his second day in the field, crying on the edge of his trailer, and he says, I just don't think I can do this. I said, mate, this is going to be the hardest week of your life, but you'll get through it. And he's still with us. I think it's 22 years. Someone who's looking to buy a franchise, and he actually phoned all of our past franchisees.
Right.
And he said, I was expecting there to be some bad stories in there. And he said, look, there was a couple, and no hiding any of that. Some people are going to have some bad experiences. But he said, it's amazing at how many of the guys that I spoke to who, ex-franchisees who would do it again, but just from health reasons and other things is the reasons that they left gyms. And even ones that actually didn't do well in gyms, they said, it wasn't the system, it was me.
So welcome back to the Jim's Mowing and the Jim's Group podcast. I've got Chris Hansen with me today, who's a very special guest. He's down from Sydney, but he's a long-term franchisor and was a franchisee. And your dad as well, Peter, was very influential in the gym story as well. So it's great to have Chris, the second generation, into the studio today. So welcome, Chris.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I force Chris to do this because I normally just, when they come down franchisors, especially if they're coming from interstate, I'll say, come do a podcast. So Chris was kind enough to basically say, yep, let's do it. And let's ask as much as we can about Jim's Mowing and being a franchisee and what's involved in the division, because you've got a lot of great advice, which you shared on the last podcast you did, but there would have been a few updates since then. So what's been happening since the last time we had a chat with you?
Well, there's always new things that are going on in any time in business. It's been really good in respect to we've seen quite a lot of guys coming through. Those have been able to get their rounds up and running, and it's just rewarding when they come back to you 6 months after they've started and said it's been the best thing that's ever happened. So
now you've onboarded a lot of franchisees over the years. So what type of backgrounds or where are people coming from before becoming a franchisee?
I probably find most of mine come from out of industry.
Right.
Particularly, they've worked for someone as the corporate world type person. It always seems to be the person that's had enough. They've got to a stage in life where they've got a little bit of financial backing to be able to take a punt on themselves, which is always good to see people who are prepared to put that effort into growing something for themselves.
And most of the guys from the corporate world that come to you, are they keen gardeners, or they just know Jim's Mowing is a home service vehicle, they want to get them out of their job, or what are they sort of inkling towards Jim's Mowing for?
A lot of them do like mowing their own lawn. They typically tell you, look, I mow my lawn, I love my lawn. They've got that little bit of passion for the gardens, and when they've got that passion, it's easy to then bring that into something like Jim's Mowing, because like anything, if you've got the passion, it tends to show in the work that you do, and it certainly comes through to the customers, which makes it very easy for them to build their runs.
And with the corporate guys, what do you find as, obviously you talked to a lot of prospects over the years, what do you find are the couple of things that are really the key drivers, or what actually gets them across the line to then come into doing the training experience?
I would always say once they've gone and had a look at quite a lot of the content that you've been making, has been a really big contributor to the fact that they've gone and seen a lot of people and the success stories that they've had, and then they've come in and they've said, okay, well, so what can I do to prove to myself that it's going to work for me?
Right.
And a lot of the times it comes down to getting them and speaking to other franchise owners, a couple of trial days if they need to. Usually one, they have a fair idea of what they need to do to be successful, and from there it's just going through the gym's process of doing the training, coming into the system, and then just following all the support that we have in place for them.
That's one thing some people are surprised that we actually offer is the trial day. So do you want to actually talk about that concept of the trial day? Because I think it's probably one of the best ways to actually learn about being a franchisee. They can watch everything they want and have a chat to people, but I think that trial day definitely can tell them pretty quickly if it's for them or not. So do you want to talk about what's involved with that and how does that work?
So they'd get in touch with a local person to them, go out, meet up with them. They'd then go out to a couple of jobs. At the end of jobs, the trainer or the person taking them out typically will run through, okay, well, how did you find the work? And these are some of the more specific things that you'll need to do. And then talk to them about opportunities around a property, so they start to get in their mind of what they're looking for. It's not just you get in, you mow the lawn and you disappear. It's what else can I provide to the client? The more services you get from that client, the less travel you do, the more money you're going to ultimately make out of the business. And so it's just getting them into that idea of people they're at home, they're thinking, I mowed my lawn, it's been the best thing I've ever done, I want to mow lawns for a living. And it's taken them 2.5 hours to mow a lawn, and then they've started to go, well, how do I get through the amount of jobs that I need to be able to make some money?
Yeah.
And then when they've been shown this is how it works, this is what you need to do, and then getting through the jobs in a fraction of the time that they're used to, because they're using quality gear, they're using and being shown how to do it properly, and all of a sudden that penny drops and they know, okay, now I understand. I don't have to mow, 100 lawns in a day or anything crazy. I understand if I do an extra upsell, I get a hedge trimming job or some more gardening out of someone, I turn a $90 job or a $100 job into a $200-300 job. I need less jobs to be able to get through in the day to make a decent return on investment.
And with the guys that are starting as well, do you have like a package offering for them, or do you have like any recommended equipment they use? Because we've obviously got training on now, and we have suppliers who come in and show people equipment, and I've done heaps of interviews and everyone uses different stuff. So what do you sort of push your guys towards, or what do you say from an equipment point of view?
It really comes down to what they're setting themselves up on. Right. A guy who's got a trailer, it really doesn't matter, because the petrol smell's not going to be in a van. They've got the petrol smell in there. They've got to then go through whirlybirds and putting in firewalls and things like that just for safety and making sure they're not going to cause themselves any unnecessary harm. So that type of thing, they would probably look at battery, whereas for a trailer, they could look at both. I'm a big believer in you should start with petrol to start with.
Right.
And the main reason for that is you typically get a lot of the clean-up type jobs. You can run out of batteries if you haven't made a full investment into them. So you need quite a lot to get started. In my opinion, again, you could get away with a little bit less if you've got the ability to charge at site, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So it really is something where I say, look, your first lot of gear, especially your mower, the mower's the most important one because you can fill it up and keep getting through the job, whereas the brush cutter, hedge trimmer and the blower, they're not as important to have the petrol, but it still helps to be able to fill it up and continue your work.
And in your region recently, like since we spoke last time, is there any guys who've come on as a new starter and recently, and you've checked in the 6 months and they've said this has been great for my life, or any sort of new guys that resonate to you?
I would probably say, and for years I was very much against having independent franchisees come into Jim's Mowing Sydney, because they've learnt their way and it's hard to then change them to understand the Jim's way. I have had a recent franchisee come in and he's absolutely killed it, and he's gone through and he's copied and gone through everything Jim's and just put it into his business. Every aspect of it, hasn't missed a beat, and he's absolutely killing it. And the best thing about that is he's then since spoken to a couple of other independents in the area. They've done the training now, and they're looking to come on board in the next couple of months. And if they're anything like him, I'll have 100 of them, because they already know what they're doing and they're very easy to get up and off the ground. They already have a bit of work, and it's just then some of the Jim stuff that helps them improve their business.
I'm glad you raised this, because this is obviously a hot topic online all the time. Don't go with gyms and just do some Facebook ads or post in local groups and you'll be busy and you keep all the money for yourself. And you've got independents who, I think, we've got a few independents actually in training now who from other systems coming through the gyms, and the people in business actually know how hard it is to generate quality leads and stuff like that. It's generally the people who don't own a business who will say that type of comment. So what would you sort of say to the independents, like if there's independents out there about coming across to Jim's Mowing? First and foremost, I don't think it's for every independent, because some of them won't fall within the Jim system. So you've got to be coachable to our system. That's the
correct. You've got to be willing to open up to the ideas of how Jim's runs the business, and then looking for the opportunities and how to help your fellow Jim's person. It's not a cutthroat thing. I think that's unfortunately where they think, well, if I'm benefiting, someone else has to lose. It's not that case at all. It's you come in, if you're helping benefit the group, so if you've got a job that you don't particularly like, put it back into the Jim system, because that might be a good job for someone else, especially someone new who's trying to get their business up and off the ground. And then when other jobs come through, you typically find the guys that have got the experience are called on by the newer guys to be able to then say, look, I need some help. You've got someone who's got the bigger experiences, and we've just had that with one of the guys who's come back from leaving gyms. He sold everything. He's come back in and he's gone, well, I only want to focus on the commercial stuff that you guys generate for me now. And so that's his aim. And we've had others who have left and they're now coming, they're starting later this week. They've gone away, they've tried the hipages, they've tried the Airtaskers, they've gone through that and they've gone, the leads are always better at gyms. And so it was been good, because they've come back and they're going to soak up a lot of my landscaping work, my artificial turf, the stuff that I typically don't have a lot of franchise owners doing, which is going to be great for us. They'll be able to take all that work. And
I love hearing that, because exactly what you said is spot on. Like, not all leads are created equal, right? And the Jim's Mowing lead or the Jim's lead is completely different to a lead you get on like one of those aggregators, right? And I think people just have to go and learn that for themselves, and then they come back to us and go, is not a bad deal what they've got. Because if you look at the actual cost for what they pay you monthly, break that down compared to what they'd be paying for independent lead aggregator, plus all the time wasters and stuff, it's an absolute no-brainer, plus everything else they get.
Well, the funny thing is I actually had subscribed to the Airtasker one flare previously, and some of the leads that were coming through are $62. Our lead fee at the moment is $11.50. It's not, you can't compare the two, and you're competing against 6 maybe other people for the one flare job. Jim's, it sends it to one franchise owner. So if you're talking about just that alone, it's huge.
And plus on Airtasker, they obviously keep a percentage off the job if you're using it via the app. Plus with hipages, it goes to 6 people or 5 people or whatever, right? So with us, it goes to one person. And do you think mainly sometimes the sentiment is like they just want to have their own brand, or they just want to do it themselves? They feel as though they're too proud to use the franchise system? Or why do you think people stay independent? Because like objectively, when you look at it, just from a marketing lead cost point of view, the Jim's Mowing franchise route is far, I'd say, more cost effective just from a marketing cost alone than what they could do as an independent. What do you think stops people?
I would say I think they look at the initial investment, and the initial investment, they think to themselves, if I put that into marketing, I'm going to be able to kill it. But then if you, for example, that $62 into a franchise fee, when you actually break it down, you're there going, well, you're probably going to get 3 times more work out of Jim's, and it's probably going to end up costing you the same, and you're probably more likely to be successful in the Jim's, using the Jim's brand to leverage to get into properties and charge a little bit more. So ultimately, I think you're well behind if you go down that path. But that's a mindset some people can't get past. They don't know enough about Jim's to be able to then really do an informed decision. They've just gone through they've read something here and they've gone, oh mate, it's instantly crap. Yeah. I'm not going to be interested in that. Yeah. That's just not even close to what it's like.
I also think the downtime as well, but time for them to get established, right? So first 12 months, and they're not going to be busy from day one. They've got to do all these things, whereas with Jim's Mowing, they're going to be pretty much, you'll start getting a lead hopefully in day one, and away you go. And they don't take into account that lost revenue or that lost income that comes into it. So look at 30 grand. It's like, well, hang on, you got to start yourself as an independent, but you're going to lose out on all that money which you could have just paid for Jim's from the start. That's sort of the way I look at it.
Well, yeah, and that's, I think, a couple of the people more recently that have come into Jim's Mowing Sydney is they've come in and they've said, I try to do it myself, and you're there going, okay, well, how did that all work out? Look, it's okay, but no one really knows who I am. And it's like, great. And then you're instantly giving them that recognition with the brand that, okay, well, how many jobs is that going to get you into that you couldn't get into yourself? And that's not even considering the contracts department of Jim's that they typically send out quite a bit of work to the new guys, which helps them just generating income, so that it just means it's a bit easier for them to get their businesses.
And you mentioned the word brand as well, and I think brand sometimes people think can be a bit of a wanky term sometimes, but I think from being with Jim's for so long, it really does matter. I think, if you went and asked 20 people on the street up here and said, if you name one mowing company that does mowing, it's going to be Jim's every single time. It won't be anyone else. So, brand in the market. Do you want to outline how powerful that is? Well,
we've had people who've come in and that was their test case. They've gone and asked 10, 20 people, name a mowing business. And when it overwhelmingly comes back and says, Jim's Mowing, it's so well known. If you go and 80% of people are saying Jim's Mowing, or 90% of people are saying Jim's Mowing, you're there going, well, why would you look anywhere else?
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty hard to compete against a business like Jim's when it's so strong with the brand that it has.
And we've had recently a couple of, I won't name the systems, but they come from other franchise systems, probably due to a cost. They couldn't get in and maybe that was cheaper. And then they've come into us after a year and you ask them, what's been the changes or why, and they just basically say the brand and the leads. Like no one knew me here in the market with that other system, whereas they come to Jim's Mowing, instantly people know what they are, and leads are a lot better, and they find that the quality is better as well.
Well, the one thing that you've got to always consider is if you're proud of the brand and you push the brand is the ultimate leverage thing that you can use to make it better for your business. Now, if you're not going to keep your trailer looking good, if you're not going to be well dressed in your uniform, because that's not the kind of person, then it's probably not a good outcome for you. But when we see the new leads that come in, they're typically around another job where a franchisee's been. They've done quality work.
Yeah.
Someone phones Jim's and says, mate, I want the guy that was there, and that goes into the system and it gets allocated out to the next available.
Well, it's a great point, Chris, because you're coming in at a point which is always the best point, because you're leveraging off all the goodwill and all the jobs that have been done over 40 years almost in a point, and those people going around that area. So you come in at a great time when you come in now, because you get all that benefit of that, that sweat equity or that brand equity that's been built in the area. So I think it's a great time for people to come in. I think as well there's a bit of a pushback against platforms now. So people are a bit sick of platforms and they don't have a bit of trust in it, whereas with gyms they know if they come to us, something happens, we have a work guarantee in place which we can obviously use and help.
Yeah, I mean, the work guarantee is one of those things. I think it's massively underutilised by so many franchise people coming into the franchise because you've got a phone. Inside your phone, you've got however many contact numbers you've got in there. And if you're starting a business, the number one place you would come and say, look, I'm joining gyms, I'm going to come and do some free services. You send that to every single person. I'm looking to get my business up and off the ground, and it's a free service to you. Most people, they remember who you are, and they'll typically say, well, if it's going to help you develop a business and over and above that plus what you get from gyms, it typically doesn't take too long to get a bit of momentum going. The momentum then starts feeding itself, and before you know it, you're there going, I'm starting to get pretty fully booked, and it goes from there.
Now, what are some common misconceptions or myths you have to clear up with prospects? So there's obviously a lot of myths about gyms mowing online sometimes regarding they might go, well, how much they're paying you per job or whatever it is. What are some common ones that you address?
I'd probably say the franchise fees is the one that I always get the most around. Typically people, they're thinking, what percentage are you going to take out of every job? It's always the percentage, and we're not interested in a percentage. You pay the same rate every single week. It's the same. It doesn't change. The only variable is the lead fee. It's pretty consistent. You know what you've got to budget around. You know what you've got to have as your costs, and then it's up to you as to how big you want to make the thing.
And also another one you probably get is... you mentioned it before, gyms is a very good team culture. It's very counterintuitive to a lot of people. They think there's so many gyms maybe in the area that everyone's competitive and cutting each other's lunch for jobs and stuff, but it's the complete opposite. So do you want to talk a little bit about territories and go on a bit about how that sort of works, and maybe the guys, they're not really in competition with each other?
No, well, I mean, the territories aren't big. They're designed not to be big in gyms, and the main reason is because you can take work wherever you like, because ultimately you've got your network. You're then looking into your network as to where to get the work, or where you're going to pick up some of your new work when you start. But the idea behind it is franchise owners are going to get to a stage where your neighbour might not be able to do a job. Now, if you're well known to him and you've gone to meetings and you've spent time getting to know your fellow franchise owner, they're likely to say, oh, I know Joel doesn't have enough work, so I'm going to flick him that extra work that I can't do, and vice versa. And then when they go on holidays, if they're away for a month because they're going to see family or whatever it might be, they've got like a buddy system where, mate, if I've got any jobs that come through in the time when I'm away, I've done everything I can, but those occasional jobs come through, and they've got someone who can look after a customer who they want to keep happy. So it works in so many ways to be part of that group.
Well, that's a good point you mentioned, which people might not realise, is like, as an independent, who's looking after your clients if you want to take a month off? Or if something happens to you and break your leg, whereas with gyms, it's extremely easy to organise, isn't it?
And it's also the fact that a customer knows, okay, I haven't been able to get hold of Joel, so I jump on the phone and they go, oh, look, we'll send it as a once-off to another franchise owner, and then it prompts us to go and find out what's happened to that franchise owner to then make sure he's okay, then get him back on track, or get him to, okay, well, what's happened? And it could be something that's unforeseen that's happened, that you're making sure you reach out to someone and make sure they're okay.
A lot of the time, gyms mowing is a partner decision as well. So the wife or the partner is making a decision with the husband, or generally could be vice versa. So when wives are involved, because you obviously would meet with a lot of couples, what are common questions that you have to address from the wives or from the partner of the person looking into it?
It's usually the safety.
Right.
Yeah, well, it's all around the safety of income.
Okay.
I've got that income coming in every week. Yep. I know where it's allocated to. I know that we're going to be able to keep the roof over our head and everything else. Yep. And typically it comes down to the making sure the partner can see that the franchise owner has got the support around him to be able to help him get his business up and off the ground. Once they see that they've got the support there, they typically trust their husband, otherwise they probably wouldn't be with them, and then they're able to get their business going.
And things like gyms online, for example, would definitely help, and obviously the technology side of it too.
Well, we actually did we got a proper survey done a few years back, and the number one concern a lot of wives had was, I don't want another job.
Right.
I've already got, the household that I've got to look after, all the things that you got to do as, as someone in a relationship. And they just went, I don't want to be having to work my full-time job with the family and then coming and helping you with that side of the business.
Yep.
And with something like the Jimbo app, where pretty much you're at the job, you can invoice straight away. You've just got to then do a bit of reconciliation at the end of the day, set your new run for tomorrow, and you're done.
Yep.
It makes us a lot easier to get your business without your partner having to get involved. Now, some franchise owners still like to have their partners involved, and I think a lot of partners like to make sure they can see the money coming in and everything else is going as it should be. But it's there to be able to make sure they feel comfortable and safe in what's being provided, and they know the support's there.
It's a great point, yeah. So just to reiterate, if you do want to be involved, you can be, and that's quite often the case, husband and wife teams all the time. But if you don't want to be involved, the systems and technology are there to make it easy for the sole trader or for the franchise owner to do what they need to do, and you won't have to have any involvement. So it can work both ways as well. Now, in gyms as well, there's a common thing that we know, a term called splits. Do you want to talk about splits for people who don't know what we're talking about there, and just how that can obviously help the business owner as well?
Okay, so some franchise or people coming into the franchise don't feel super comfortable starting with no clients. Now, and other franchise owners who are in the system have got to a stage, for them, it's a choice between letting clients go or continuing to build and put on staff. Some of them go, I don't want to put on staff. So for them, it makes a lot more sense. And especially with the gym system, if you're looking to stay inside gyms and you're not ever going to put staff on, it's the one way of being able to really improve your business, because you're selling off customers that are either out of area or ones that, for whatever your reasons are, they're in an area you don't want to go any longer, where you then say, okay, well, I'm going to sell those 20, 30 clients, whatever it may be. That's a good start for someone new. And it's great because it gives them instant cash flow over and above the pay for work guarantee. It just really secures that income, and it gets them closer to that magical number of maybe 60, 80 regular customers, where their business is, it's a good business at that stage. It's standalone. It doesn't need a lot more help. It just needs to be improved maybe in the income side of things. But the split itself is going to be that good starting base for someone new.
And also with growth, so in gyms, obviously, they can go beyond a sole trader. So do you want to talk about maybe some of the guys in your area who've built a team and maybe a bit about how they've done it?
Yeah, so they'll typically get to the point where they can't physically do any more work. They've already got their systems and processes in place to be able to then, okay, well, what do I want for next? And they'll look at how they set up a new team member, either in the truck with them, or some of them have actually put on new vehicles at that time. They'll send out the vehicle with the one person in it. They'll get that as being, this is the income that's coming from that vehicle each week, and then the franchise owner is out there developing those new relationships, picking up new work, the once-off stuff, the bigger cleanup jobs, and then they continue to build their business from there. So a lot of the times they'll have not just gyms, but also other ways of being able to get business, and they'll typically be from things that they've learnt in gyms, through the contracts department, or through body corporates, things like that, where they're getting to know different relationships. That's helping them feed them some work, plus with gyms, that's feeding them other work, and then ultimately they're able to grow their business to whatever it looks like.
And there's no extra charges or anything if they want to do that sort of stuff?
Not at all. I mean, anyone who's going to scale their business should always have multiple sources of where work comes from. You can't rely on one and one only. We know we have a few franchisees in my region that do rely very heavily on gyms, and they'll pick up any job that I've basically got available. So the more I can generate for them, they're happy. But ultimately, you got to share it amongst everyone who's looking for work. So
yeah, and the great thing about the flat fee model is you can grow as big as you want revenue wise, and it's basically the same fee just depending on how many leads I guess you take every month, and that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mentioned the word there, lead fees. So lead fees is another thing which people get really confused about online, and they just think it's a complete money grab. So do you want to talk about the concept of the lead fees and why they exist?
Well, I think that was probably the best thing that Jim ever actually put into the business.
Yep.
And the main reason for that is because it stopped a lot of the cherry picking. Back in the day when we didn't have the lead fee, franchise owners would leave themselves on for work and take work whenever it came through, because they would just say, yeah, look, I'm happy to take that, or no, I don't want that one. And it actually forced a lot of the franchisees to have bad behaviour back then.
Yep.
Now with the lead fee, it means that they're not going to take it if they don't want it. They're only really interested in the work that they want, and that was probably the best thing that ever came into gyms, to be able to say, well, you're only going to get the stuff that you really want, which may be a mow reg or it could be a garden cleanup, again, depending on the type of work that you're chasing. But it's a really good way for new guys to be able to build their business knowing that people aren't taking unnecessary work that could be helping someone new coming into the business get their business up and off the ground.
Absolutely. It's better for the customer as well, because if you're paying for that,
absolutely.
if you're paying for that lead, like, you're going to call it back quick, right, and try and do everything you can, because people online assume that we should be, you should only pay for a lead when it's a converted job, but that's not the reason for it. You're paying for it. It's incentivizing you to call them quick, be professional, be prompt, and that's your opportunity to win the job. And I think there's a lot of misconception around lead fees, and a lot of people don't get it. But you remember, because you were there before they actually come in, so you would have known the issues, as you were saying before it come in.
And it's also when you look at the lead fee and you say, okay, well, I didn't win the job today, but that doesn't mean that you can't get in contact with the customer in a couple of weeks, because their experience with whoever they got to do the job might have been horrible. And they might be there going, if only, but maybe they just went, I'll try someone else at a later stage. Now, if you then phone the client in a couple of weeks thinking, well, I'll just see if they're looking for someone else, they might go, yeah, look, come around, give me a quote, and if I'm happy, I'll get you to do it. Now, the client's never lost until you decide that you're not going to follow it up. So if you're doing all the things that Jim's teaches you to do, which is to any lead you get, you follow it up and you keep getting, sending them messages and doing the things that you should be as a business owner, that's ultimately going to mean that they're going to, at some stage, be let down by someone. In this industry, it's amazing at how many people get let down by some contractor.
Yeah.
And the franchise owners will probably tell you, the amount of leads that they get is, oh, my guy, he hasn't turned up. Well, guess what? Jim's going to turn up. Yeah,
and that's a great point. And also the lead fee, you never know what it could actually turn into. I remember we had John Wiles the other day and we were interviewing him, and I think his first lead was like a body corporate with 6 things or whatever it was, and he says he's still got that customer after like 10 or 11 years, and you look at the lifetime value of that job from that one Jim's lead, it would have been tens of thousands of dollars. So it's amazing what those leads can actually lead to. Could be a bunch of different things.
Yeah, well, my story is a little bit different. When I got my first lead, it was a old age pensioner, Mrs. Nash. She was fantastic, a lovely lady, but she really couldn't afford much. I thought, this is probably not going to be a long-term client, but I ended up doing a property a couple of times, and when I said, look, I've probably done it a little on the cheap side, I need to look at the pricing, she said, look, I just can't afford it. And for me, it was like, okay, so how do we get past this? And her suggestion to me, and I didn't think about it, which makes me a little bit upset these days, but was she said, how about I get you more work? I'll speak to all my friends at Bingo and I'll look to get you some more referral work, and anyone who's in my network's happy to get you to do some work. And I said, well, anyone you bring on to me, I'll keep your price the same for as long as I can. So that was
a great story.
Yeah, so that was
initiative.
So she prompted that, not me, but hindsight would be great for anyone to say, look, well, how about you go and get me referrals, and that's how I'm going to help grow my business.
That's a great idea. And I was going to say as well, back when you were a franchisee as well, how do you look back on that time now after being a franchisor for so many years?
Some with a little bit of regret. I wish I had probably done it a little bit longer. And the main reason I say that is because I see some of the opportunities that the franchise owners have. Some of the just the different type of work that they've got and how they've been able to scale their business. And by the time I moved into the position that I'm in now, I just got to the stage where my business was really starting to crank out some good money.
Yep.
That's when my dad came and said, look, it's probably time that you come in and learn the other side of the business and come into the office and help the franchise owners, because you've learned enough in the field.
Yep.
And that was probably the only regret I had, was the fact that I didn't really get to capitalise on how well my business had grown.
Yeah, but it's great for the franchisees that are coming in, because you've been there and you've done it and you've had a successful business, right? So what you're telling them is not from just theory, it's from actual learned experience as well, which I think is always really handy. And with your regional franchisor role as well now, so do you want to explain bits to people who don't know what I'm talking about when I say regional franchisor, what that role is and what you're sort of doing with franchisees?
So it's pretty much your support mechanism, your coaching. That's what we're here to do, is pretty much coach you through any of the problems that you have. From time to time, there's things that come up in business that you're not really sure about, and that's where the franchisor's role comes into play, because they've probably either experienced it themselves or they've had the experiences through other franchise owners to be able to walk you through what you need to do to make sure you look after the client and or how you ultimately price a job, or again, depending on what it is.
Yeah, and you'd have a big team as well. Like I think you mentioned Gary is one of your support guys up there, so you've got a pretty good team as well of support. Like everyone's on emails and calls all the time, and there's training there, and you can help with tenders. There's a whole bunch of different things you guys do alone. This doesn't include obviously all the marketing and all that stuff as well, the lead gen stuff you guys do for that 1 monthly fee. So it's a really good deal. Yeah, so
I've got Gary who does help with the new franchise owners. I mean, he's there for everyone, but ultimately he's there to I suppose keep the the training wheels on a new guy trying to learn to ride a bike.
Yep.
He's there guiding them as to what they need to do. He goes and sees them in the field, checks the work, making sure they're doing quality work, because quality work will get you more work. So it's good to have someone that can help in that space. And he's a qualified landscaper, so there's nothing he doesn't know about on the tools work. He was a franchisee for 14 years, well credentialed, so it makes my job a lot easier to be able to help the guys when I need to, and if they can't get hold of him, I'm their backup. So,
and the great thing with gyms, which I want to point out to people which might not consider, you have a lot of independent businesses who pay for business coaches or these trade service masterminds, right? And they're paying like $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Whereas I objectively look at what we offer. You get that essentially. You've got every single franchisee in your region, or who's on contact. You got yourself. Plus you get a lead gen aspect, plus you get the brand and all this sort of stuff for pretty much a third of that price of what I've mentioned there. Does it seem to be like it's just silly that people, as an independent, don't really look harder into this, maybe because there's some misconceptions, or what's your sort of thoughts around that?
I just think people, unfortunately, don't do as much research as they should, and they don't take the time to actually speak to the franchisor.
Yeah.
They'll put in an inquiry, for example, or get all the time, you get inquiries, and you might only speak to 50% of them. And the 50% that you do speak to, you try and get them when they're out of hours, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. And then they never really look at anything you send them. They never really ask any questions. And you're trying to say, well, mate, I'm happy to walk you through how it all works and spend time so you can see exactly what gyms is all about before you make the decision to say, oh, no, it's not for me. And that's fine. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But ultimately, I think a lot of them just come to a conclusion far too quickly without actually getting to what's going to help you grow your business.
And with the gardening industry overall, where do you see technology is going to come into this sort of place? Obviously, there's robot mowers people are seeing online and things like that. And how do you see that's going to affect or work into the industry?
Robot mowers is a bit of a funny one because they do have some good technology when it comes to the robot mowers. I think it's going to be guys that look at evolving their business. The one thing that they can't do at the moment is the edges. They can't really do a lot of the gardening aspect, but the mowing itself is, if you had a business model where you went, okay, well, I can buy this, rent it to the client, put it together on a bit of a package, and then I go there, I tidy up the edges every couple of weeks, do the gardening, and that's you're charging them whatever you charge them for that service, but it's just a different type of service.
Yeah.
I don't think, and the best part about this industry is I don't think it's going anywhere for quite some time, unless it comes along very, very quickly with the humanoids and all sorts of things. Who knows? But at the moment, it certainly seems like it's got still a long way to go.
And do you think it's obviously, I think it's a great time now to look at a home service business, because obviously AI is disrupting a lot of professional workplaces, and a lot of jobs that people might have thought were safe 5 years ago probably aren't going to be safe, and companies are just basically gutting people with it as well. So what would you sort of say to someone maybe looking at, maybe corporate world, what should they be doing, or would you sort of tell them to ask themselves before doing this?
Well, I think the number one thing they should be doing is getting the research in now, like looking at different opportunities when it comes to maybe a business or something outside of where AI is going to disrupt so many things, and looking at some, whether it's mowing or whether it's another one of the gym's services, it doesn't really matter. It comes down to what you've got passion around, and look into it, check it all out, but do it thoroughly. Make sure you speak to all the franchisees, or as many as you can, because ultimately they'll give you the good, the bad and the ugly about gyms, and they'll tell you how it works, and then you get to make that decision based on right information, not wrong information.
I want to be very clear about that, because that's a good point you mentioned about we're open about franchisees to talk to, right? So when someone inquires, for example, they have a chat with you and they might go kind of speak to some franchisees, or you offer them a list, right, of the franchisees in the region to contact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Almost one of the first things I do when I finish a conversation, I'll give them 2 or 3 guys. Here's a couple of guys near you. Have a chat to them if you want to spend a day with them. go nuts.
Yeah, and
I'll organise it if you don't want to.
And I wanted to point that out because I've had a new prospects in training have been from other systems, and they tell me that they might have to pay $5,000 deposit before they get a list, or they wouldn't provide a list until they signed a contract. All these sorts of things. I want to be really clear with people that with gyms, we provide that list right up front. So if you want to inquire and actually speak with people, and we give that to you straight away. And I think that's a really big thing what we do from a transparency point of view.
Well, it's actually been pretty funny. In the last couple of weeks, I've had a franchise, or someone who's looking to buy a franchise, and he actually phoned all of our past franchisees.
Right.
And he said, I was expecting there to be some bad stories in there. And he said, look, there was a couple, and no hiding any of that. Some people are going to have some bad experiences. But he said, it's amazing at how many of the guys that I spoke to who, ex-franchisees who would do it again, but just from health reasons and other things is the reasons that they left gyms. And even ones that actually didn't do well in gyms, they said it wasn't the system, it was me.
Oh, really?
And they'd owned up to the fact that they probably shouldn't have done it.
Wow.
But the system itself, they said, I just couldn't do it because I wasn't prepared to get out of bed. Or I wasn't prepared to talk about extra services with clients. And they acknowledged that it was them, not gyms. And I thought that was amazing.
It is amazing. And that's why I'm glad you said that, because I just want to get it clear for people so we can clip it up online and put it. But the transparency I think we have compared to other brands, which I know is second to none. And I think that's great. If you are thinking about just inquiring and get a list. But you mentioned before people leaving gyms and then coming back to gyms, which I still think is amazing as well. I haven't really heard of that in franchising at all, to be honest with you. So do you want to talk about some of those people who come back to gyms and how does that all work?
So fortunately, they've come back in a short space of time, so they haven't been told that they need to relearn the whole system again, and nothing's really changed since they've left. But it's been good because they've come back and they've gone through the whole process, and they think it's just easy as turning a tap on and off, and it's, you've got to get a new franchise agreement and go through the normal process. But they've come in, they've transitioned back in, and there's been no hiccups to date. As I said, there's one who's about to start, but they'll be fine because, as I said, they'll pick up all that unserviced work that I was having with stuff like artificial turf and so forth.
Awesome. Now, we're in training week here as well in Melbourne, which you're down for. So people might go, what's the training involved? Do I come and learn how to use a line trimmer, or do I go to like a mower school, or what's the actual involved with the training itself? Well,
I haven't been to the training here for quite some time, but I do understand. I don't think there's a lot of practical here. I think it's mostly in and around the quoting side, the scheduling, how to use all the systems in gyms. And then for us, we've got at least 5 to 10 days back in Sydney where we want to make sure you're doing quality work, you know what you're doing with the line trimmer and how to quote, and local area marketing, all the things that you need to do when you're in and around home. We get you that 5 to 10 days because we want to make sure when we let you loose with clients, you're going to do quality work, because quality work gets more work.
I didn't know that, so that's great to know. So you do your 5 days down here, and then you go back and you do an extra 5 to 10 days for quality sign-off, really, and how to do different things in your region on top of what you're doing here. So it's pretty comprehensive.
Yep.
And I was going to say as well, with the technical side of the job, when you were doing it back in the day, how long did it take you to get proficient, or you felt comfortable with all the equipment?
Probably about a month.
A month, yeah.
Yeah, I think you got to do a fair bit of work before you get really comfortable with using just the line trimmer instead of the actual atom edger and being able to get that nice crisp edge. It takes a little bit of time, but it's mostly in and around the brush cutter. I think that and the blower are the two areas that really make a job,
right?
Especially a lawn mowing job, because if you've got the sharp edges and you do a really good blow down, the customer comes home, the property looks fantastic, and that's ultimately how you win them over.
Now, there's one thing I want to mention as well is the health benefits. A lot of guys come in who I interview from a corporate world, and you can just see they say mental health, or they just say not as stressed, and there's this other side which I don't think gets promoted to franchise a lot. Everyone's like own boss and stuff, but we never say mental health or health benefits. So what are you sort of comments around that with some of the guys who come in?
Yeah, look, they definitely have a lot less stress. That typically is, I think, one of the big catalysts of why they leave their corporate jobs. They just get to the point where they go, I just can't deal with the stress any longer. And for them, it makes sense. If you're getting older, you probably don't want to put that extra pressure on your heart, all the other aspects of your life. So it makes sense to look at other opportunities that may be better for you.
And body adjustment, there's obviously a time if you're coming from the corporate to doing this, like what would you, obviously there's little muscles and things that you didn't know you had, and after a day in the field you probably feel that. So how long did it take you to get adjusted back in the day?
It probably is about a month.
Right.
So you get on the tools, you then start getting your fitness up, you get used to the work that you're doing, and it's just a recovery probably more than anything, especially if you haven't done a lot of physical work like this before.
Yeah.
I actually had a franchise owner who phoned me after his second day in the field, crying on the edge of his trailer, and he says, I just don't think I can do this. I said, mate, this is going to be the hardest week of your life, but you'll get through it. And he's still with us. I think it's 22 years now.
Oh, really? 22 years now.
And he said, if you didn't talk me off the ledge at the end of that first week, I don't know if I would have made it. But it's hard for someone because he was a little bit older, but he got into it. He finally got through it, and he said, mate, he's healthy as now. He couldn't be happier, and yeah, he's been with us a long time.
You probably might not know off the top of your head, but how many guys do you have in your region who have been with us for longer than 10 years?
Mine's actually quite a lot.
Yeah.
I've got about 80 out of the 200.
That's a lot. Now,
Yeah.
for anyone listening, so in a franchise system, to have 80 more than out of that in a home services franchise system is quite a large number. Why do you think they keep staying for so long?
Well, I suppose they get used to the system. They love the fact that they can just phone up whenever they need some help. For me, I think I got a lot of extra engagement when I started doing a weekly brief for them.
Right.
Well, I was running down what's happening in gyms, what's happening in the industry, new latest products, all things like that, where I'd send it out to them. And instead of, because they've been in a long time, they may not necessarily have time to come to a franchise meeting. So for some of these guys, they've loved the fact that I've done the weekly brief, and they'll phone me if they don't like something, or I've said something that they, Chris, I don't agree with that. And then we have a conversation around it, and 9 times out of 10, I'll be able to get them to see why I've put it out there, and then they've learnt something new, and I'm finding a lot more engagement from them for the weekly brief than for a lot of the other communications that we have.
Oh, cool.
Which then opens up conversations, which then keeps them in line with gyms, which is, I think, one of the reasons that they stay.
That's great. So your weekly brief, you mentioned meetings as well. So how regular are these meetings, and sort of what's involved with that?
So we do the franchise meetings. We hold them at the change of season, so 4 times a year.
Okay.
Then we do a lot of other training and things like mini trade days and stuff like that. So just depending on what the franchise owners need at the time. So I think we have a high pressure cleaning day the other week. We also got a turf day
Right.
Coming up in August. So we've got different things depending on what the franchise owners are asking for. So the more that they give us feedback as to what they want to learn, that's where we tend to set up those particular sessions.
Perfect. Now, just to summarise as well, people might go, what do I get for the initial purchase price? I pay the purchase price, and for the fees, what do I get, right? And obviously they're getting a lot of value, the guys who stay. 80 out of 200 longer than 10 years is great. But when someone asks you that sort of question, what do you tell them?
Well, they're going to get a lot of stuff that they're going to have to get in their business anyway,
Right.
Because not all of it is the franchise fee. A lot of it is, you got your uniforms that you got to get, you got stationery, things that you're probably not even going to think about getting as a new business owner. It pretty much all gets set up for you. In my startup, I've got a marketing pack, so I make sure that we put together a marketing pro forma to say, well, this is where we're going to be spending money to help generate work for you,
Yep.
to ultimately help them in their business.
And I'll ask you a couple of questions before we finish up. From your experience for so long here, what people don't do well in Jim's Mowing? So guys who don't do well, and you've mentioned that, they've even mentioned on the call what's on them and stuff like that, but what typical person doesn't do well or shouldn't do Jim's Mowing?
Someone who's not prepared to really look after clients. I think a lot of people come in and it's about me. What am I going to get out of this? What's going to happen for me? And if you come in with that sort of mindset, you're typically not going to do as well as you would if you're there thinking, well, how can I add value for that client? If I can add value for that client, what are they going to help me with? That's the better conversation, to be able to, if I can make them very happy with the job, are they going to refer me to someone else? Then they may not think to do it, but if you ask and say, well, if you're happy with what I did today, could you refer me to friends and family? Here's some extra cards. And you typically find that people who care about their customers and put their customers first will ultimately do very well. The ones that don't, and they're thinking about themselves, oh, well, how come I didn't make $300 instead of $100 out of that job? They're ultimately not going to do well because they care about themselves, not the customer.
Right, and that was going to be my last question. You pretty much answered it. Who does them well in gyms? So who are the people who, 10 years plus, is it just comes down to customer service, or what are they doing?
Well, first and foremost, I think it comes down to the customer service. But secondly, you've also got to have an attention to detail.
Right.
Quality work will always get you more work. If you don't leave a property looking good, if you're there going, look, I'm going to cut corners, and typically franchise owners that will struggle will be there going, but the customer's only paying $100. Yeah, but when you leave, if you haven't done the edges, if you haven't blown the property and made it look good, then ultimately they're going to go, it was an okay job, but is anyone going to come across the street and get you to do the work? Of course not. So do the quality work, and the quality work will get you more work.
Well, perfect. Chris, thank you for coming in today. We appreciate it. If you want to learn more, jimsmowing.com.au or 131546. No obligation call. Speak with a franchisor like Chris or the many franchisors in the Gyms group, and we hopefully will see you here in training shortly.